All right, I'm going to start us. So let's give us like a 10-second pause, and I'm going to start us up, sir.
Beautiful.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to another Franchise Things. I'm really excited about today's topic. It's been a little bit since our last presentation, but thankfully our speaker's been on top of it and really making sure that we put this together. And there's a lot of great information. So welcome to You Can't Be a Franchisor Without Franchisees, a subtitled Franchise Sales for Emerging Franchisors. And with me, I am very happy to have David Golihan. David is with Franchise Insights and Franchise Direct Digital. He's going to be our main speaker today. I've known David at least 10 plus years. I'm thinking it's more 13 or 14.
It does seem like it's been that long.
I think there was a little box company that we may have met on back in 2008, I think, or something.
I was going to say
there.
2008, 2009. Yeah, I think that's when it was with some of the big players, the IFA and ourselves.
Let's start off with some banter. I'm going to throw you for a loop here. What book have you read that you'd recommend, or give a good book recommendation?
Wow. Probably the one I give to everyone who owns their own business is the E-Myth Revisited. That's really kind of my Bible.
Love it.
I don't think there's been more concepts put into a very short piece of work that's easily digestible than that one.
I'm going to throw mine is the Road Less Stupid, all about the dumb tax for businesses. Highly recommend it. And then another non-business one, I just finished Breath by James Nestor about breathing. And I have been a mouth breather basically all of my life, and I'm really trying to actually become more of a nose breather, and that's been a challenge, but all the benefits and no snoring. So I've actually been working on trying to become a better nose breather.
Love it.
Check out Breath. But Road Less Stupid, I love E-Myth. Road Less Stupid is part of my business Bible. You got to check it out. I have a quote that I'm going to bring up from that book, and there's a whole bunch of other good stuff, but that's my recommendation. All right, David, here is a lot of words about you, but why don't you go ahead and tell me, who are you? I get that a lot because I'm a lawyer. It's pretty easy. What do you do? Franchise law. Fine, cool. What is David Golihan?
Yeah, a little harder definition there. It's been a really kind of wild, organic ride. I've been in the industry over 20 years at this point, primarily in lead generation. And I started out with Franchise Opportunities Network back in what could be considered the heyday of the portals, when they kind of ruled the roost and there were so many different options. I worked with those guys for about 6 years, launching and developing one of their properties for them. And we got purchased by Landmark Communications. And I'd been through a $9 billion buyout when I was with Blockbuster Communication, when Viacom bought those guys. And so $35 million buyout didn't get me that excited. I wrote my name of my 10 favorite clients on a piece of paper. And I think it was 8 months before I was working for one of them. I went to work with a guy named Sean Hall, who owns Blue Coast Savings Consultants and also owned a concept called Glove Lady at the time, and went in to manage the budgets for his 2 franchises. And he also tasked me with kind of becoming the most knowledgeable person in franchise advertising on the online side of the equation, something that I took on pretty seriously. And from there, we went and launched an outsourcing company, Franchise Outsource Solutions, and worked on several concepts with some success. That was right as we hit the point where the whole financial markets melted down, the economy kind of took its crash. And at that point, I pulled a bit of a hat trick and turned my partner back into a paying client, spun myself out as my own ad agency with Franchise Insights, and kind of went on from there. And then through the course of that, the business has grown nicely. We've been fortunate enough to be in contact with a lot of high growth concepts, anything from Kona Ice to Home Vestors. And then in January of this year, I had started working last year to convert my business over to full digital. And then Sean McGarry, who owns Franchise Direct Worldwide, came to me and said, we've known each other a long time and we were about to make the move you made. And I was curious if you'd come run my company while we do it. And so I stepped in to run the new arm of Franchise Direct Digital, which we hope will go mimic the footprint of Franchise Direct, which is offices in the United States, Dublin, Sydney, and Dubai. And we're starting here in the States, whereas they started in the UK. And the goal here is just to bring with Franchise Insights, I do more sales consulting, analytics, portal placement type of work, much more heavy on the consulting side. And the Franchise Direct Digital side, what we're really trying to do here is take the same tactics that we've used successfully for the last 20 years to bring that portal to the forefront globally, and just bring these tactics to individual franchisors and bring the traffic to their individual site and help those guys achieve their success directly.
What I love about you, David, is you're not necessarily a PR guy. You're not necessarily a franchise sales guy. You're not necessarily a franchise marketing guy, but yes, you are at all of those.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to a lot of pieces of this industry. And you know, you and I have had some conversation. I've gotten a good focus on how these pieces fit together, how each domino can affect the next domino, and kind of breaking the silos out between legal, sales, PR, et cetera, and kind of getting it all working in motion in tandem.
Excellent. This is great. So we're moving on, and I'm going to use one of our coined terms. And I get the question a lot as a franchise lawyer, what does it take to franchise? And I say I developed the acronym LOTS. It takes lots to franchise. And the first L is legal, of course. And then I say you need an operations manual. And then a couple of years ago, we kind of added the T for technology, right? How is your POS system? Do you have the ability to pull royalty reports? How is your website? Is your SEO set up for having individual locations? So that's the T. And then I'm pretty happy with the S, because I think a lot of lawyers miss this, and this is the sales strategy. So it could be lots with two S's, but if you don't have a sales strategy and you don't sell franchises, you're not a franchisor. So don't go through the LOT without the S, and that's why I'm excited to present with you on today's topic, because you know, I'm not a parent if I don't ever have kids. I'm not a franchisor without franchises. And I tell my clients I have a very strong self-interest that they sell as many franchises as they should, because if they don't sell franchises, they don't need me. And I like it when my clients need me.
Yeah. Well, and I kidded a lot. I run into a lot of new concepts that come through, and you know, we just spent X amount on legal and we're pretty strapped, but we're ready. And in reality, if you step into this without the marketing budget, it's kind of like going to run a race where you paid the entry, but you don't have shoes. You're not going to win. Just getting in and saying I'm now franchisable doesn't get the job done. You've got to step in with the budgets for expansion to actually get the dream alive.
So, funny aside, we just did our new sticker for our beer attorney practice, and it says 0.0, I don't run, I brew beer. Analogy I give is, here's your fancy red sports car, manual transmission, and but you don't know how to drive stick. What are you going to do with that beautiful sports car? I give you the FDD, here's your operations manual, here's your website, but once again, if I don't get you some franchises, it's going to sit in the garage. So
with no franchisees, you're the same multi-unit owner that you were when you started. You're just out a lot of money and a lot of time.
Absolutely. So this session is geared towards new franchisors, but it's going to be anyone who's looking to get sales information. So if you're looking to sell franchises, you're in the right place. Okay, topics we will cover. David, take away on our summary, and then I'll get us ready for the next slide.
Yeah, we're just going to cover a rather broad range of information here. We're going to try to condense it in a short amount of time, but I'm welcome to dive deeper to anybody that's like, wow, I liked what you said there, but I want to know more. We're going to touch on a broad range from digital advertising budgets, portal advertising budgets, how to make your placements, what your content should look like, portal content in particular, because that is oftentimes messed up. Selecting sales staff, what your options are there and what could work best for your situation, how to work your leads, and then most importantly, at the end of it all, as we know, it's the analysis. It's great to do the work, but if you don't know how to make the work better, you're just caught in a rut.
Advertising budget. So the first question when I saw this slide, David, was how many franchisors, especially new franchisors, do you think actually have a franchise budget?
And the answer there is not enough. You know, there again, like I said a moment ago, a lot of people come up and go, like, you know, I spent all my money trying to get launched and now I don't have it. The budget's critical, and the budget keeps getting higher, as you can see here. On average, the new franchise cost here, this was off the 2020 numbers from franchising.com. We're up to 12,000 and change. And I asked this question on my potential clients, and these numbers aren't off. The numbers here are accurate. They reflect 12,138 marketing dollars according to franchising.com's 2020 report, and that's up from 10.5 in 2019. in polling clients that we work with before we start working with them, asking them the cost per acquisition, these numbers are in line. So I've found out in the marketplace anyway.
And I'm guessing that trend from up from 10,500, that's not going to disappear. I'm guessing leads will get more expensive, not the other way around.
Mike, I don't think we've seen a time that it goes the other way, have we? It seems to only go one direction. And I'd like to blame a lot of this on the pandemic, et cetera, but we just don't know where this shakes out. This has been the wildest time these last 2 years, and who knows where it goes from here. But down is probably not the direction.
And you're fishing with a big net, right? And a big sea, that's the problem.
Yep.
That's why, like some of my clients, if you can get out of the shotgun approach, and if you can get the sniper, like we're doing a medical franchise, we're targeting doctors, or we're targeting that sort of person, I think that helps, because then you're not just trying to get everyone. When everyone's your client, it's expensive to try to reach everyone, right?
Yeah. Well, in particular, with your portal advertising, you're kind of just out there to be seen by who's there. But with your digital tactics, the better you can target and profile, like you're talking about, the better you'll be. It's really a matter of reverse engineer who the successful person is, and then going at them directly.
And I see results vary by sector, tactic utilized, quality. I'm guessing things that are very general, like I have another pizza franchise or hamburger franchise.
Right. I mean, if we turn around and look at an automotive repair is a great example. It's a really slow lead drive. It's a really expensive opportunity. The cost per acquisitions there can be pretty astronomical. Versus if you step into a children's concept, it's end cap retail with a minimal build out. And the lower your cost per acquisition, the less capital you need, the easier it is to get the job done.
I'm guessing that any new franchisor's advertising budget should be a minimum of $12,138.
It depends on what your growth goal is. If you're trying to do unit a month, yeah. As you and I have talked about in previous conversations, that's a little fast to run a lot of times out of the gate for somebody that's just stepping in that doesn't yet know how to do this franchisor job. I see running 6 units year one is probably a slow and steady growth goal of success for year one, rather than coming out trying to blow the doors off.
My favorite is where I hear people, well, you know what, I'm going to make my own franchise online website, buy the superbestfranchise.com, and that's going to sell all my franchises and I have no costs. But then you're fighting how many other established portals, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
And we don't even want to talk about the budget they spend to get their placement. Yeah.
Hey, let's see, next slide.
And basically, I mean, like looking at the end of that, basically what we want to do is we want to bench for that number. Expect that $12,000 number until you're proven otherwise. What your goal naturally is to beat it, be more efficient and effective than that number. But come in braced for that number until you've proven that you can beat it.
All right, what is a franchise portal, David? Moving on to the next slide. I know that I've heard it, but if just new franchisors may not necessarily know what a franchise portal is.
It is one of the favorite and most unfavorite things out there in the industry, depending on who you're talking to. Franchise portals are basically directory sites that have an aggregate of information on multiple concepts, typically between 1 and 400 concepts per site, depending on how the site's doing. On that directory, they're broken up by sector, they're broken up by investment, and then by subsector within sector. So you could get into automotive, then you could get into transmissions versus paint, et cetera. But those guys basically own the broad net search market results. If you come in to buy a pizza franchise, buy an automotive franchise, et cetera, you're gonna land there. Those guys own that space and they're not gonna go away.
And what are some the bigger franchise portals?
The top 3 that we deal with, I mean, keep in mind, we deal with them all. This industry is fragmented a lot. The portal sector is fragmented a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years as we keep increasing digital tactics, increasing the ability for the individual ZOR to get a hold of these tactics and make it work. But through our work with Franchise Insights, we do a lot of sales analysis and sales process consulting. So we see not only what we're spending in a month, but where the conversions are going. The top 3 portals in the marketplace at the moment, it's Franchise Direct, it's Franchise Opportunities Network, and it's Biz by Sell. Those 3 are consistently for the last 5 to 7 years, the top of the performers of everything that I do.
And I know Biz by Sell does resales as well. So if I want to sell my existing business, do the others, do they all do that now?
They do. The only one that's doing that currently is Biz by Sell. Okay. BizQuest was doing it as well, but they acquired them. And so they're the only ones in the resale space. To a lesser degree, businessbroker.net, which is owned by Franchise Opportunities Network. They've got state-specific existing business listings there as well. The rest of the portals are new property only.
Okay. And I see you start with your goal, and this is something, a conversation I have with a lot of our new franchisors. You don't want to sell 100 in the first year. Do you have the infrastructure to support 100?
And you don't.
What is
Yeah, and I mean, we see this a lot. We in the work that I do with clients where it's got a lot of longevity to it, we typically see your first 10 units need to be your songbirds. You really need to move slow on the first 10 because you want those 10, everyone to stick, everyone to be happy, and everyone to perform. If you come out trying to do 20, 30, 40 units, there's a really big chance you're going to botch that and have some unwind. And if those 10 are good, we still see typically an internal checkup at 20 units, because at that point you need to beef up your infrastructure and make sure that the in-house is taken care of. Then they run that expansion to 40 units and the checkup comes again. All of a sudden, you've now outgrown your infrastructure. You need to fortify inside. And then it's that next run to 100, at which point the check comes again. It's a constant back and forth where you've outsold, need to get the support beefed up. But if you come out of the gate trying to sell 100 units, you're literally just going to make a very expensive mess.
My favorite is I get, when should I hire someone to help me? When do I hire my next executive? I say, you'll get to the point where you should hire your next executive, and then 6 months later, you'll hire them.
That's about the truth too. Yep, I'll agree with that.
I see you got some math. You want to walk us through the slide that we have up?
Yeah, I basically just used some rudimentary numbers here, starting out with a very round number of an annual growth goal of 10 units. And basically from there, we need to understand that the rest of these numbers we're going to look at have some requirements. They're predicated. This is predicated upon the right placements with the right sources, the right ad copy that's going to convert interest, and a tight sales process where you're getting the job done and you're not just hemorrhaging out the back door. Provided those three things are in place, we're typically seeing on average 100, 120 leads to a sale. And that's across different mediums, doesn't really matter what it is. And then the last piece of information we need to understand to do the math on this is our cost per lead. And that's a piece that varies widely. It can vary by the concept and how much capital you need. It can vary by your geography and how many states you're in. A lot of variables here. But what we're going to do is take a rather typical situation, and I think you'll agree with your launches. It's pretty typical for people to start out in their non-registration states. It gets you 35 to start with. You're missing a couple of the big ones, which we'll get into later, that really do matter on the CPL side. But it's a pretty fair starting footprint. And so if we start out with this footprint of 35 states, we're looking at a $100,000 investment and a $50,000 capital filter in place. Our rack rate from the portals, and there is a variant here, but I'm averaging this out, is about $48 a lead. So basically running our math, our 10 units, our 120 units a lead, our $44 a lead, we're at a $57,600 annual budget, or about $4,800 a month to get this job done. And that's not sales money. This is just marketing dollars just to get the leads in the door. This isn't CRMs, salespeople, materials, et cetera.
I mean, that assumes that you properly handle these 120 leads. Otherwise, you're going to need a lot more.
Right there again. I mean, we're back to, you've got to have your content's got to be right. It's got to be in the right places where you're turning diamonds and not dirt. And you've got to have a sales process, the CRM in place that's all encompassing to where you're not going to leak anything out the back.
All right. Advertising placements. Can you walk us through what we got for David?
Yeah, I mean, there's basically 4 ways your visitor is going to find you. They're either going to find you doing an online search within your industry, trying to research buying or franchising your sector. They're either going to, maybe they saw you on social media, you did a grand opening, you did a big event, maybe they were a potential customer and they saw you there. Maybe they found you through a franchise portal doing broad searches. So they're not looking for buy a pizza franchise in Des Moines, Iowa. They're looking, I just want to buy a pizza franchise. And then the last one is the brokers and your coaches. They're not to be denied in this sector. And there's a lot of work going on there. And there's a lot of people brought to the table through those 2 options.
Before we get, I want to talk more about broker, but let's chat about social media, because I'm not up to up to date on the top ticking and what you young kids are doing these days. Can
Right.
you walk through leads and social media? I mean, MySpace is probably still the #1, correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it changes all the time, right? We've watched a lot of things progress through here. It started out very heavily with Facebook, naturally, right? We start out there. A lot of people are still on Facebook, but particularly it's your baby boomer generation that stayed there. As these other social media platforms stayed up, they were change resistant, so to speak, and they stayed on Facebook. A lot of your Generation Xers and your Generation Ys, they went over to Instagram. They got tired of having to get that close to people that maybe they just wanted to be distant friends with, and created a lot of social havoc there. So a lot of those people jumped ship. We're seeing a lot of viability on Instagram, in particular with Gen X and Gen Y. And then, you know, you work your way out. LinkedIn, very good amongst the professional crowd. LinkedIn is a very good place to farm if you know exactly who you're looking for and know their background. And then you work your way down to TikTok. Honestly, unless you're looking for children to buy your franchise, or teenagers or people in their early 20s, it's probably not the medium for you. 15-second videos of people working back and forth isn't going to sell your franchise.
All right, let's chat about franchise brokers. I say they're the necessary evil sometimes. Can we get
They are. You know, I've worked with a lot of the brokerages in the country. Beth Schmidt-Spiegler, that works with me at Franchise Insights, was marketing director at Franet for 5 years, and they were a large client of mine. I've worked with the Entrepreneur Source for 12 or 13 years now, working with their coaches. They're very good at what they do. The brokers are, I mean, I wouldn't even say necessary evil. They're necessary. The catch is a lot of times they get used incorrectly, which could make it look a little abusive. If you've got a new concept that's out there, it's under $100,000 total investment, it's in the wheelhouse of everyone. I personally don't recommend using brokers and coaches to sell your major metros, your tier 1 markets. I don't think you need a broker to sell Metro Atlanta. I don't think you need to sell Metro Houston, Metro Denver, Metro Los Angeles. I think where their true value comes in, and I mean, that might not be a fair statement, where you get your biggest bang for the buck from your 40% of your franchise fee that you have to pay these guys for a sale, is when you're in secondary and tertiary markets. When your turnaround, you're not looking at Atlanta, Georgia, but you're looking at Macon, Georgia, or you're looking at Savannah, Georgia. All of a sudden, these guys can be a really great tool for you, because most of the traffic coming in through the franchise portals and such is coming into major metro. Till you start getting into really granular digital tactics where you're targeting specific areas, the coaches, the brokers are a really great avenue there.
That's something I think you're giving about 40 to 50% of the initial franchise fee away, which is talking to my new franchisors. You don't make money on the franchise fee. If you do, you're one of the lucky few. And most people think, okay, I'll give up 50% of my franchise fee. Well, that's not for the leads, right? That's for the sales.
That's just for the sales. Yeah, and that you know, with the brokers, a lot of times they're bringing leads in that they generated. So you're out of that piece. But by the time you bring them in for discovery day, your training sessions and all of that, literally you might be upside down unless you just had that much built in. And I'm always wary of franchises that are profitable off their franchise fee, because that's not the goal. The goal is for you to make your money off the franchisee's success. And I've seen a lot of, in particular, biz ops, that they're very right side up on the sale. The support isn't there, and they can kind of flash in the pan. The one I saw that was the biggest was Red Bull vending machines. Those guys ran around and took money with a quickness, and people jumped right in. The fees way overextended the materials. The next thing you know, those guys are in the Bahamas and can't be found.
And then, you know, when we work with franchise brokers, I kind of tell my clients, they're the offense. They want to sell as many as they can because they get commission usually. And we're sometimes viewed as the defense. I want to make sure the sales are done compliant, because if you don't have a compliant sale, there could be, you know, rescission, damages, etc. But I always tell them, we're on the same team, and the client's the coach. So the client gets a direct, you know, did you wait the full 14 days, which is actually 16 days? Did you do everything, every dot, every I, and cross every T? And I think there's a balance, but it's up to the coach, the client, versus the legal and then the franchise sales team and working together.
It is. And it can be a hard line to walk, because if you're not converting the sales for your broker network, they're less likely to present you. But you're right. I mean, the last thing you want to do in this situation, and particularly for startup emerging brands, the last thing you want to do is sell a franchise to the wrong person. Don't do the right thing for the wrong reason, because you will pay for it over the course of time, and they won't be there to help you unwind it or help you with the legal to get that person out of your system.
And I want to write a book one day called The First Franchisee, and kind of just chronicle some of the horror stories of the first franchisee. The problem is you're almost designed to fail. Because I want someone who's entrepreneurial enough to take a chance on my new brand, Drum Pizza. But then I need you to become not entrepreneurial enough that you're going to follow my system. And usually that the first few will end up won't be the last.
It's a big myth in this industry that we're looking for entrepreneurs. And in reality, an entrepreneur starts his own business. We're looking for small business owners that'll follow directions, is really what we're looking for. We just want them to not be risk averse.
And then we dealt with a client many years ago. They were an after-school tutoring franchise, and they thought teachers would make a great franchisee. Well, they realized they were wrong. Business owners makes great franchisees, and they hire the teachers.
Right.
Not hiring the employee. The employee doesn't always necessarily make a good business owner, and it can, but figuring that out.
You'll find your teachers don't have a business background. They're used to being told what to do and working within the system. That they're not used to having to be all.
And those that can't do teach. Not saying that's valid, but that's a cliche that we've all heard. But
it's a very good analogy. I mean, probably the one that we use the most that applies to is maid work. The maid companies aren't looking for maids, and they're not looking for someone to clean houses. They're looking for somebody to manage maids that clean houses.
It's kind of like Domino's isn't a pizza company; it's a delivery logistics company, right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. This is part, I think. So watch this. We got the best marketing, best salespeople ever. But what if we don't have validation? I'd love for you to talk about validation here, because we're talking about the right franchisee and this. I think, and you can't really talk about any sales without having financial validation.
I mean, your item 19 will either make you or break you, right? At the end of the day, validation's all you've got. And, it's one thing, going back to what we were talking about, don't sell to the wrong person. You could turn around and have great franchise listings out there, great leads coming in, great salespeople, great CRM, everything's perfect. But you start selling to the wrong person, and it's just going to break itself apart. And it's the right way to look at it. You have to loop me back where we were, Mike.
For validation. What happens when you have
right. So let's say I sell to the wrong person. But let's say I make this bad sale, and I've got everything else in line. Well, then I turn around and I'm a few units down the line, and we're still churning them. But all of a sudden, here they come. Well, let me talk to a few existing franchisees, and now your existing franchisees bad-mouthing you because you left them on an island, or they had to do it all themselves and figured out, or they didn't get the support. And the next thing you know, you've got somebody counteractive to your sales process that's in your system. That's a necessary step in the system. Who's going to buy one without talking to somebody that owned one? It's great to talk to the guy selling it, but I mean, you want to go buy the car, you test drive the car. So the first thing the franchisor is the potential franchisee wants to do is talk to somebody who's already got their feet in the water. And if you sold to the wrong person, you didn't just kill that unit, but you may have killed sequential units for years to come. And I've run into the situation where franchisors thought their franchisees loved them. And then you get at the Z level and they're like, I got left here alone. I had to figure all this out. They weren't there. They didn't give me a roadmap to success. And from a consulting standpoint, where we're looking at potential outsourcing stuff, that's the guys we avoid like the plague. And it's a bad setup, and it's really hard to get out of it. It's a lot easier to sell to the right person and be slow than it is to make these mistakes that are going to cost a lot of time and money to unwind.
There was an old Simpson episode where Marge is selling houses, and she said, sell the right house for the right person. And the sales guy goes, Marge, let me let you know a little secret. The right house is the one for sale. The right person is anyone. Or what's that? Your two primary qualifications for a franchisee is a checkbook and a mirror, so you can just make sure they have a breath.
Right.
And that's I think when we were prepping for this, you told me something about no. What's the best advice you think you can give a franchisor? Saying no learn how to say no.
Learn how to say no. Yeah. Don't take in bad money. And at the end of the day, I mean, you want to get the sales, you want to get the units. It makes you feel good, but it's a short-term play for a long-term goal that doesn't work. And we've seen time and time again, it's just a bad methodology.
go off the slide here. Is it make sense? Is it cheaper? Does it help? Is it more efficient if I target an area? And here's what I tell my clients, like, okay, hey, I'm in Denver, drum pizza, that's great. I'm just going to focus on Wyoming, New Mexico, and some of the surrounding states. And that's my plan. And I say, that's great. But what are you going to do when someone from Texas calls and wants to write you a check? Are you going to say no? Because you're going to have that ability if you want to stick to this geographic plan. What can you speak to that from what the services that you provide and what you see? Is it better? Yes, no? Thoughts?
It really depends. And I hate that answer, but it's true. There's a lot of things like pizza is a good example. You're kind of supply chain strangleholded to a degree. You need to be able to get your dough, your cups, your boxes, and everything streamlined and distributed. So to turn around and open up that store in Texas is honestly probably not a very good idea. Versus a lot of stuff that's not as product driven, something more service driven, I wouldn't hesitate to open up in Texas. I wouldn't hesitate to cast a broader net and look nationwide. But you really got to analyze your concept and what the needs are there. And then, like you're saying, you've got to be willing to say no. If you're opening up a supply chain situation and you're based in Denver, you have no business being in Texas. That guy's on an island. Everything's going to cost more to get to him. He's not close enough for you to go visit, and it opens the door for a whole range of problems. But at the end of the day, we keep coming back to the same thing, which is you have to be willing to say no to a check.
Sometimes it can be challenging. All right, let's talk about let's see, advertising placements. Go ahead from websites and take us away.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing we hear all the time. The leads that come off my website are the best ones, and the answer is they are, and they should be. If you've built your website well, it's got your history, it's got information on the company, it's got information on what's required, and that's where they should come from. And a lot of the people they look at their franchise portal leads. A lot of your franchise portal leads, the good ones, are going to bounce off that portal, go to Google, you wind up at your website. So at the end of the day, your website is your foundation. That has to be all inclusive. That has to be buttoned up tight, because no matter what other channel they come from, they're going to show up there. And the days of build it and they'll come are gone, as we talked about earlier. Build it and market it correctly, and they will come. But at the end of the day, all these tactics are going to hub off your website. And the website's rankings in Google, which is who still does 90% of everything out there, it seems like. Your domain history carries a lot of weight here. If you're an emerging brand with a brand new website, you're not going to get instant rankings on the organic side of the equation. Domain history plays a big role. Your on-page SEO is very important, and that's your tags, your content, your titles, your meta tags. It's everything that helps Google tear your website apart and know what it's looking at before it has to dig page to page. It's the headers, etc. The next piece that's most important is off-page linking. And where that comes in is it shows not just that you're talking about yourself, but that other people that are viable are talking about you. All of a sudden, the person that runs the food review site is talking about Mike's Pizza in Denver. That's valuable. So the cross-linking, the fact that you're being recognized within your industry, within your sector, and that other people are paying attention and speaking of you, very big piece. Usability is something that's very often overlooked. I'm working with a client right now where their main website looks fine on your desktop, but when you get into working on your phone, which is where over 60% of your traffic comes from now is phone related, it's hard to believe that much has gone mobile. But they turned around and had a 20 to 30 second delay on load. And so, I mean, all of a sudden you've taken over half your traffic and thrown it out the window because you look like you don't know what you're doing.
Kind of like having a jammed front door on your retail store where it takes you 30 seconds to get in the store and you're just going to give up.
Or a restaurant with 100 people in it, 4 places to sit. It's not going to get the job done, right? So yeah, your usability is a big deal. You've got to have that mobile application. You've got it. Your typical load speed that Google looks for on mobile to be good is 2.5 seconds or less, to give you an idea. It needs to be fast in this day and age. And that leads to your performance, your page load speed. They are a big deal. You get a lot of drop off if things don't load quickly. But today's society, I mean, you and I grew up where it was like people's ability, their attention span is just dwindling. We don't have much further we can dwindle before it doesn't exist. People are now, it's instant gratification, 2 to 5 seconds, something needs to happen, or I'm going to hit a button, swipe a thumb, something's going to go away. And then the last piece is your social media. And this piece, you know, a few years ago, it didn't matter. And then it mattered. And now it's almost critical. You can have a really nice site. You can have some really nice presentation. If your social media looks like you dropped off a cliff 2 years ago, people will assume you dropped off a cliff 2 years ago. All of a sudden, it looks like the whole business is just on coast and that it doesn't have the accelerator push. And I'm running into that a lot now as social's wearing in a little bit. It's been a few years. Everybody jumped in hot and heavy. And here we go. Look at our Facebook page. Look at our LinkedIn. Look at this, look at that. What I'm finding now is people are letting it wane and they're shooting themselves in the foot with it because all of a sudden it looks like the company stopped operating.
Dave, I think another issue right on there is if you have a blog on your website, and the last blog was 2016,
Right.
or 2019. Yeah. Can't wait for the next year. In for a great one.
They were once a week, and then they were once a month, and then they were once a quarter and once a year. And now it just looks like the whole business is going down. And I mean, we could argue all day that that's not factual, but it's perception. And the perception on the people you're trying to get to come buy your business is all you've got. It's everything.
I mean, you're better off having an FAQ than a blog. If you have 3 topics, switch them then.
That's it.
Yep. Okay. SEO, fun story. So when I started Drumlaw in 2010, drumlaw.com was taken. And I had to name it Drumlaw because I was Texas bar licensed, still am, but they required, I couldn't have a trade name.
Uh-huh.
There was another drum, no relation, in Connecticut, and he owned drumlaw.com. And he actually then hired a young associate, embezzled a bunch of money and disappeared. And it was left with this young associate. And thankfully though, they let the website lapse. And I don't know if they ever found him, but that's how I got drumlaw.com instead of having to be drum-law or something else.
Nice. Wild story.
Fun. So we got some history to that URL before we got it.
I love it. So what we've got here, basically, we've just run through the most common digital tactics. And I realize this webinar is broken up pretty evenly between the portals and the digital, and it's just because they're so radically different. Your digital tactics really comes into your SEO, which is first and foremost. This is your long play here. This is your search engine optimization. This is what would get you to compete with the franchise portals for, let's buy a pizza franchise as a broad term. Your first page results here are a very long range goal, and it takes years. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's a long, steady road to hoe, but it's like contributing to your 401k. It's not a lot of fun, but over the long haul, it's a really good idea. And so what we found here is 75% of people don't look past page 1. And now we're into, why does SEM matter and PPC matter? Well, because you're not on page 1. And you want to be, and what's on page 1 is the franchise portals, and maybe Pizza Hut, maybe Domino's, but not Mike's Pizza out of Denver. So you come into your search engine marketing, which is what SEM is, and your PPC, which is pay-per-click marketing. What you get here is the opportunity to buy your way onto page 1 in either top or bottom page presence. Typically, Google runs 3 to 4 ads up top before they run their organic returns, and then they run another set at the bottom. What you've got here, whereas SEO is very top of funnel approach, this is a long play. Your SEM and PPC is a short-term play. You can engage people, get the leads in instantly. You can have an instant position on page 1 and instantly be seeing those results. It just comes down to what does it cost to get the job done and what are the right terms to get the person you're looking for in the door. Social media is also, like we've touched on several times, become big, particularly Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We do find a lot of times these are being utilized. What's that?
I heard I remember 5 years, 6 years ago, it was very cheap to advertise on Facebook. Is that cheap much? Is that still compared to PPC and some others?
No, I mean, like with anything else, the ad costs keep going up. One nice thing they've done there is they've got some targeting options they didn't used to have, because they're culling a lot more information than they used to. When you're like, well, I'm 25 and I'm single and I'm a guy. Now Facebook's really farming you.
Facebook,
and they've got you putting in your,
what?
Yeah, they've got your job titles, they've got your companies you work for, they've got all this information on you. So all of a sudden now you can take Facebook and actually do some very targeted advertising. But no, the expenses have gone up. I mean, naturally, as time goes on, it just keeps costing more. And then we get into that's one thing I did want to mention with social marketing. We see a lot of times here, these are used more heavily for B2C work. I've got a grand opening, or hey, look, Omaha, Nebraska, we've got a new location coming. We'd love for you to come out this coming Saturday. We've got some stars going to be there, etc. Whatever we might be doing. A lot of people use it more for ground level stir up, for events and openings, and more for their customers rather than the B2B acquisition for franchisees. But it can be done there. It just gets a little trickier. You've got to draw your lines out. And then third-party email is a really big piece that we're watching come up a lot. And as you and I talked about targeting, this is where it comes in. You can target with stuff like Facebook, but you can now take third-party email and break out about any demographic that you want. And some examples I threw down here: the location, age, credit score, experience, and preferences. I could come in and say, like we talked about one earlier, that they were making a bad match, but we'll use the example anyway. Say we're looking for teachers for an education opportunity. We could come in and say we only want teachers that are married, that own their own home, that have great credit, that are within this circle of geography, and we could keep on from there. I want them to own a black car. I mean, you name it. We can stack these criteria where we can really hone this person down and use, like you said, let's get off the shotgun approach. Let's go snipe them. All of a sudden, you can snipe them at where they are and cater the message to what you already know is true. And that's become a very, very powerful tool. And my advice right here, there's so many agencies running around right now. And my best advice, number one, is get advice. Don't come into this thing blind. Don't hire someone you don't know who is, and don't just fall in love with someone for no reason. Talk to other brands in the space. You'd be surprised. A lot of these brands isolate each other like they've got the greatest secret, and the guy next door is not going to talk to me. What you and I have found over the years, good franchisors talk to each other, and they share what's working. It's not like it's in a bowl and there's only so many of it, and if I share it with you, I'm not going to have it. It doesn't really work that way. And so I encourage franchisors to get some advice from someone. And then if you're going to engage an agency, I encourage you to engage an agency that's got franchise experience. We've watched a lot of large players come into this space lately that have been out selling widgets or whatever the case may be. We'll use that overall term. And they've been doing it well. And all of a sudden they want to call their way into franchising. And you look at their website, they've been in medical and they've been in insurance and they've got these other things. And the last thing on the list is franchising. Franchising, probably the most intricate thing on the list of what they do.
And Dave, I think that goes for any supplier. That's what I tell. If you're looking for a franchise lawyer, I say look for two things. One, make sure they're a franchise lawyer. Name the 14 registration states. You'll know. Are you a part of the IFA, American Bar Association?
Right.
So that's step one. Make sure it's not a business lawyer that, once again, does estate, business, wills, and franchising. And then two, it's relationship. Find someone that you actually want to deal with. But that first one, whether it's operations manual, whether it's software, make sure they know our industry. We see it all the time where you go to a trade show, you'll see the latest new person trying to break through. They throw franchising in front of their digital marketing, franchise, loyalty program, franchise, whatever, and then you won't see them again next year. The players are there. You can kind of know, and that's something I'd recommend for any supplier in this industry. Make sure they really have franchise experience.
When I see your example all the time where they come and go, well, yeah, this is an attorney friend of mine and I've known him forever and he cut me a deal and he put my FDD together. You may as well light that thing on fire and use it to start the fireplace in the living room. If you do sell off that FDD, you'll wind up in jail unless you're lucky. We see a lot of bad work get done by a lot of people that don't have the industry experience here. And probably the biggest caveat, don't deal with somebody that doesn't know this space. They're just going to waste your money and potentially get you in trouble.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. And we got some, and then what's another, we kind of covered that use the tactics that are most successful for other franchise systems.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're not going to talk to the guy that owns the pizza place other than Mike's Pizza in Denver, go look at what he's doing. Go look at what Pizza Hut's doing. Are they on the portals? Are they on social media? What happens when you go try to Google a pizza franchise to buy one? Look at where they position themselves and follow their lead. I mean, it's great that you came up with a new pizza because you think you're better at pizza, but don't try to come up with a new way to sell franchises because you don't know what you're doing. Follow the leader, follow the guy that's had success and mimic them.
We go to a lot of franchise expos, a lot of big ones that are recurring every year. And the problem I say, it's a sniper approach, right? It's 15 grand plus or minus, depending on how many people you bring. And if you sell a franchise, great. If you don't, would you have been better off doing portals? But is it successful? And I'd say look at these shows that kind of stay in the same place and see if they have repeat vendors. If the vendor keeps coming back, I'm thinking they're selling that market. They're selling. Otherwise, they do it once and this was a waste of money and they wouldn't. It's kind of that look what other people are doing and do some research and dig.
Exactly.
Take us away, sir.
This is my template that I kind of built when I was on the franchise lead sales side of the equation at Franchise Opportunities Network. I did a lot of looking to see why would one concept get double the leads another one did. Why does one guy that's got a short brochure get more leads than the next guy does when they do the exact same thing? They're at the exact same price point. Nobody knows either one of their names. Not I'm dealing with a leader versus a nobody, but two concepts no one should know who are. And basically figured out the flow that creates submission. Like we talked about the short attention span, people jumping off pages. Basically, there's a flow of information, no matter which medium you're in, that's going to get somebody to keep reading and get them to send their information. And this is basically the short version. It's the industry and why is it a good idea? My industry is 14 billion. It's grown by 3 billion. The projections are this, and this is the place you want to be. The next step is why in the world you buy my concept in this industry. I sold you on the industry. Here's why we're the best. Here's our differentiators. Here's why we've got the best pizza in the world at Mike's Pizza in Denver. It costs less, the delivery times are less, etc. Then you come into the how we do it, how we run the operation, how we run the individual stores, treat the customers, etc. What the model actually looks like, what it takes to qualify. A lot of people like to leave this step out, like we talked about. You'll get a lot more phone calls and waste a lot more sales guy time, but you're not going to sell more units. Be very upfront that it takes $100,000. It takes access to 250. And it's going to take X amount of your time and X amount of dedication. Don't hesitate to set the fire hoops up for them to jump through, because if they won't jump through them, they're not going to run your business well. And then lastly, what they receive in return. And typically that's your training and support. What are we going to do for you up front to get you launched? And what are we going to do so that you know we are always here for your long-term success? But typically, if you will lay your information out, and in particular on the portals where you're given 5-6 paragraphs to work with, expound these, and you'll find that it typically will double the number of people that click through your stuff and submit without an unfair expectation or leaving out the details that let the pipe dream be true of somebody thinking that I'm going to open up Mike's Pizza for $10,000.
It's 11,000. So exactly, I don't want to waste my time with that.
Yep.
I see this with a lot of legal ads. I think it's the same as people think I get one shot. I got to tell you everything. 6-point font. It's back to that attention span. Have you ever gotten an email? We have a certain attorney that likes to send. I'm like, I'm not even going to read this, right? Get them interested. They can always get more information, but make sure that you get enough of what you want to get across, and you do that by less is more.
When you bring up a good point, there's two places to not give it away. First and foremost, on the lead ad. What we really want to do with this ad is entice someone to call and ask us a question. We want somebody to care enough to go, hey, that might work for me, but I got questions. Don't give it away here. And then also don't give it away on step 1 of your sales process. You want to guide this person through your sales process, guide them through the information so that they don't come up with any thoughts on their own that aren't true and just assume some things. And so I do see clients as well, they'll follow it on step 1 on the lead form, but then on step 1 of the sales process, well, I'm going to send you my full FDD and all this other. No, don't. Please don't. Please break your sales process into steps and address them one at a time. As soon as you lay everything on everyone and assume that they're going to read it and make their own decisions, their decision is going to be, I'm not going to do this, and they're going to leave. It just becomes cumbersome.
I'm excited about this next slide because I think this is going to be the one that I'm going to screen cap and share, because this is very valuable information. Back to there, this is, what should I have if I'm doing portals, which like Twitter, right? I don't get to give you 18 pages about why we're great. What should I have? What content should I start working on?
Yeah, this is a piece that I've had a few people tell me this was the biggest mystery in franchising, which I don't know that that's true, but it is something that most people haven't taken the time to break this apart to where it's explainable. And most of the franchise portals don't understand enough about the own product that they sell to even explain to you how to make it work. Unfortunately, they're just sales reps.
And this is your elevator pitch or maybe your dating profile, right? I got to talk about liking puppies and long walks on the beach.
Right. And so as we get into this, basically the portal advertising content's broken up into a couple of pieces. And the reason I broke this piece apart as well, as we've talked about overall cost per acquisition, the portals stay around because their cost per acquisition is lower than other tactics. Typically 100 to 120 leads in the portals won't cost you $12,000. And you can sell a unit. And you've seen us do work with all the way down to children's shaved ice concept that I worked on with a while. We sold 100 units a year of that thing working portals only. And we broke every metric out there. We sometimes hit cost per sale annual of $2,000 a unit, which is unheard of. And I don't ever expect to see it again. But it can be done if you've got the right concept in the right place. And so
and the right team. I mean, that's huge.
and the right team and the right sales processes. It does. They say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a team to sell franchises. There's no doubt about it. It's not a one-man show, and every piece has to be buttoned up. But the reason with that cost per acquisition being lower and the ability to hit nationwide with it, it is the first place a lot of people go, and for good reason. And so I really wanted to take a minute here to break this down, because if you put your portal ad up wrong, it won't convert right. It's really just that simple.
And David, I'm going to do something that all my supplier friends love when I do. I'm going to volunteer that you give away free services. And if anyone's listening to this and wants to email you their 120 characters, will you review it and give them feedback?
I'll be glad to. I would absolutely do that.
Just reference.
I think I'm the best 120 characters out there, to be honest with you. I've been at this a minute.
Love it. Take us through.
So basically, as you look at your franchise portal, here's the science behind it. You've got your logo, which does matter. As I'm scrolling through a page on a franchise portal, I know I want food. I know I want pizza. And now I'm going to get 12 to 15 logos on this page, and Mike's Pizza logo needs to stand out on this page, or I'm going to go right by it and go to the first thing that catches my eye. So the logo stops the eye on the page. The short description, most overlooked piece of the whole equation, you typically get 120 characters underneath your name and logo. That 120 characters could be truncated off the first line of your brochure that doesn't really say anything, or that 120 characters could let them know all kinds of enticing things. Good examples that I put up here: we're rapidly expanding, no experience required, no certifications required, mobile, low investment, work from home. You're hitting all kinds of hot buttons here.
No employees too would be huge right now.
No employees, low overhead. Exactly. So you really, as all of a sudden my eye stopped on the page because I saw your logo, if the 120 characters under it are no good, I'm looking at the next logo. And the first time I see 120 characters that matter, I'm going to click that logo and actually see this page you built. So many of the concepts out there make a good page, but if you don't follow through with the whole process and catch the front end, nobody sees your page. It's one of the least viewed things on the whole site. And next thing you know, you're crying, going, why can't I get more than 20 leads a month? And the answer is because you didn't write it to where anybody cares. And so we've got that 120 characters as you click in. The logo stops your eye. The 120 characters tell me that I care about Mike's Pizza and want to know more. I click into there. I'm now into what we refer to as the main brochure. The main brochure is very small. Typically, you're going to get a Word doc page. You're going to get a header frame, including your logo. Now, some of the sites will let that at least be dynamic, where it's got some motion in it or something like that. You typically get 3 images total, and you need to blend those. It needs to not just be an outside shot or a shot of somebody sweating to death in the gym, or it's crowded in there. You really need to blend them up. You really need to provide the outside shot of what does the storefront look like with no cars, no people, no anything in there. And then you need a couple of shots inside. You'd like them to be of people in motion, actually participating, but you don't want it to be, there again, the gym at its peak time when it's all crowded and people sweating everywhere. But you want to see some pictures of people in motion getting the job done. And then the text, which is basically the 5 points that we went through before. The industry, us and why we're great, the concept and how it works, what it takes to qualify, and what we give for you in the long term in terms of training and support.
Excellent. And I know if I were to look for a franchise, I've been to portal sites, obviously being in the industry. If I saw Mike's Pizza, which looked great, I wouldn't submit my information personally to a franchise.com or FranchiseGator, because then I know I actually go to mikespizza.com and I would submit through theirs. And
you bring up a good point there. Working with the children's shaved ice concept we talked about earlier. First year working with them, they did portal ads only, no other website work, no SEO, PPC, none of that. We found that 40% of their sales bounced off the portals and went to the internal website. It happens all the time. It's what your smarter person is going to do. Actually, they're going to, even if they do submit on the portal, they're still going to come around and go to your website and do the deeper dive. And you'll find that you get a lot of multiple submission. And those are the ones that you need to pay the most attention to. That's somebody that looked for you twice and they looked for you at home and knocked on your own door. And it's important to be aware of that. And it's also important for the fact that you don't want to cut a portal off if you've got what they call tracking pixels in place that'll let a website determine when you left one site and went to another. So a lot of the franchise portals can put tracking pixels into your site that will let you know someone left Franchise Direct and went to your site. You may have seen a lead from Direct or not. You may have seen a lead on your site or not, but what you're seeing is that somebody jumped. It's important to keep that data because you may find a portal might not be converting that well to sale for the candidates that came in, but they're making up 20% of your internal sales by bouncing people to your website. And it's important to not cut off your nose to spite your face, so to speak.
And David, do I pay the $48 if they saw Mike's Pizza, didn't submit, and then they go to Mike's Pizza? What do I pay?
No, yeah, the franchise portals charge you only on submission. So someone has to have seen your landing page, which has got your financial qualifications, et cetera, in there. And they have to have submitted their information on your page, or you don't receive that lead, you don't pay money. So in a situation where somebody bounces from the portal to your site, you're not paying for that, but the portal wants you to know that person made the jump because it gives them some strength in what they're doing and gives them some foundation in the way that they're providing people to you so that you don't jump to the wrong conclusion. And there again, cut your nose off to spite your face. All of a sudden you cut your portals out, your website traffic's in the gutter and you can't figure out what went wrong.
All right, we got some cash money talk now, correct? Back to our...
Yeah, this is a big part because we talk so much about average cost. And, we talk about average cost per sale, average cost per lead. And the reality is average doesn't exist, right? It's just the median. In the portals in particular, things can get pretty wild pretty fast. The smaller the footprint's going to be, the larger your cost. And then the higher your capital filter, the larger your cost. Let me break into something else right here as well. It's important to understand that 80% of the leads coming into the franchise portals have $100,000 or less to invest. That's a very not known important piece of this equation. So if Mike's Pizza costs $1 million, don't throw it on the portals, Mike. It's probably not going to get the turn. If you're McDonald's, you're Kentucky Fried Chicken, you can probably get away with $500,000. But if no one knows your name, they're not going to give it to you. And so what we see happen here, typically we started out with our typical, wow, I'm in the non-registration state, so I've got my 35. And so ran a few examples here just so people can see how it scales. With a $50,000 filter, you're looking at $44 a lead rack rate, typically in 35 states. It gets up to 48 to 54 as you get into $100,000. If I start dwindling these states down from there, 35 is really kind of the break point. At 35 and up, the portals charge their base min amount. Once you drain beyond that 35 and whittle it down to 25 to 34, things start to increase pretty quickly. You see about a 20% jump there, 15 to 20% your price. And you see that escalate too as the filters go, the price just keeps going. So as we go to 25 to 34 states, our 44 goes to 52. We watched almost a 20% gain there, and our 54 goes to 64, right at a 20% gain. And then as we whittle it down further, now I'm in a supply chain situation we talked about earlier with Mike's Pizza, where I got to stay in contingent states, contiguous states. All of a sudden, I'm in 11 to 24. My cost per lead is now going up 35% at a $50,000 capital filter from 44 a lead to 60. And at 100K, it's gone from 54 to 72. You're at almost a 50% increase there. It's important to understand that that average price out there doesn't pertain to you unless you're being that average person. It's gonna vary. And all of a sudden your cost per acquisition, as you do the math out, your 100 leads gets more expensive. Your cost per sale is more expensive. And all of a sudden, two people with the same process, same salespeople, same marketing spend, their cost per acquisition in concept B is 50% more than concept A, just based on their geography if everything else was equal.
And sometimes it makes sense. If it's Mike's Ice Cream, I mean, maybe don't want to go to North Dakota, Wisconsin, or some of the colder states, and I want to target those hotter states first.
Right.
So I'll get a better qualified lead, but other times it doesn't. Mike's Pizza can go anywhere. They'll love us in all 50 states.
Exactly. When it's just something to be aware of. I mean, there again, so many of the industry experts speak in these big numbers that don't really apply to you unless you happen to fall in the middle. It sounds great, but in actual practice, the variables are huge.
You get volume discounts, agency discounts. Now, that's one thing I like to always recommend to my clients to use, because you can bulk buy. So you actually aren't paying the rack rate.
We can, yeah. We get some really good rates out there in the industry. And I mean, as an example, for managing just people's media spend, if we're just going to guide your spend, work with your copy to your placements, et cetera, but we're not going to get into full sales consulting and processes and all of that, we can almost save people as much as we cost them. I watched a lot of agencies over the years double dip on their clients where they were getting a discount from the portals that they were kind of hiding, so to speak. The portal would give them an invoice, and then they'd provide a different invoice to their client where that volume discount got eaten. And then they ding their client the 15% they normally did, while they were still getting 15% from the portals. And basically they're taking 30% of an ad spend for placements, which I found absurd. I was very conscientious of that when I launched Franchise Insight, launched it with full transparency. I get a volume discount. I'm not going to deny it. The nice part with my agency is I pass that on to you. And I let my clients engage directly with the portals to where I'm negotiating the pricing, but then I'm letting them engage directly to know I never dipped into their ad spend. It's like
the franchisor that, hey, I get to bulk buy this supply. I get a 15% discount. I charge a 5%, I get a 5% rebate. You're still 10% cheaper than the franchisee would buy it on their own. And,
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, we've got it now to where we basically, it's almost a wash with what we charge for the placements, the copy, the lead testing, all of that front end work. It's almost a wash. And then if we get into where we're doing monthly consulting calls, sales analytics, sales process consulting, all of that, at this point in where we are as a business, the impact is minimal for what you're getting.
Excellent. Selecting, oh, there we go. What can I expect? This is a good one. And I'm going to put a link in the video here so you can actually click on what are the registration states. Because we talked about those, David and I did, and this is a big one. Take it away. That's
a great idea. Yeah, basically, there again, as people come into this portal advertising, they don't know what they're getting. As we touched on, 40% of the leads that come into the franchise portals are in only 3 registration states. And it's interesting if you look at a map of what states have a higher number of people in them for population than Los Angeles County. As an example, you'll find there's only 3 or 4 states in the whole country that have a higher population than LA County. The population situation makes a big role here. New York and California are undeniable if you're trying to make a huge presence with a large number of units. You're going to have to get yourself registered nationwide.
And New York right now, David, is the worst state as far as I think they have 3 examiners, 3,000 franchisors. you're going to be waiting 3 to 6 to 7 months every year to get registered. That means during that time, you don't get to sell. So if you're getting all these leads, you can't do anything with them.
Right. Well, it seems like that piece just gets messier as each year goes on. You just get further behind. But I guess the point that I wanted to make here is it's just undeniable. You'll get on the franchise portal, you clip those 3 sites out, those 3 states out, and then you go, where's my traffic? And their answer is you threw half of it in the trash and decided you didn't want to dial it. So it's important. It is, and it's not that I encourage people that they have to register there, but it's important that they understand the impact of not registering there. As you delete the largest metros in the country, it dwindles down the number of units you're going to sell without a doubt. And we've watched the Southeast carry through. I threw that in here just because we've watched the South pick up so much lately, whether it's Texas, Georgia, Florida, Arizona, the Carolinas, even Tennessee. We're watching a lot of growth happen through the southern states right now. And I think that's something to be aware of as well. And then on the capital side of the equation, we touched on this earlier. Don't fish in the wrong pond. For God's sakes, don't do that. Don't throw the wrong bait in and try to figure out why you're not catching fish. The franchise portals won't readily give you this information, but I will. 80% of the people that come in to see concepts on their sites have 100,000 liquid capital or less. We tore apart years of data and across multiple sectors and just threw it all in a hopper and did a draw the line exercise, and that's where it came out. Wasn't playing favorites or anything like that. It's just the truth. And there's a lesson in there. There again, you've got $1 million concept. You want to franchise a car dealership? Don't go there. They're not going to get the job done for you. The high end, really, for the portals, like we talked about earlier, is fast food or fast casual, big brand names, etc. You can get on with $500,000 build out. But if you're going to step in at over $100,000 and nobody knows your name, it's tough road to plow, without a doubt. And then the contact rate.
What is contact rate, David? What does contact rate mean?
Contact rate is defined by me anyway as someone that you reached out to that communicated back to you. Didn't say I'm not interested, but somebody that came back and wanted to have some further conversation or contact, be it by email, by text message, by phone, or whatever the case may be. Their lead came into your system. You called them. They might not have been available at that moment, but they said, please call me back on Wednesday. You do get to speak to them. And even if like, well, I only have $10,000 and I lied on my form, so this doesn't work for me. They were a contact. You reached them, you had some communication, some back and forth. It's important to understand with the portals, you're looking at a 40% contact rate on average. And I wish I could say, like the other stuff, it really varies and depends. It doesn't. That's pretty much no matter which sector, no matter what price point you're in, it's just the way of the walk. You're going to get about a 40% contact rate there. We do highly recommend that you don't just flush that other 60. Keep it in your CRM, keep it in your drip campaigns, send them information on new openings, etc. You may be able to bait that person back around, but definitely put them in the automated file, not the manual communication file.
Excellent. Moving on to sales staff.
This is a big one right here. I get asked all the time, where do I find my sales guy? And now we're back to it depends, right? Instead of a steady answer. My best advice here is use somebody that's done this before. Same thing with the agencies, same thing with all of that. Don't bring somebody on that doesn't know what they're doing. The most dangerous thing I've seen in the franchise sales industry is bringing on somebody that, I started delivering papers when I was 11. I've sold my whole life. I can sell anything to anybody. And that might work if my vacuum's broken and I came to you to buy a vacuum and I don't want to go to the next store. But that's not how franchising works. People aren't replacing something that's broken. They're leveraging their entire future on something that they're not actually sold themselves on buying. They don't have to have it. It's completely optional, and you're not selling widgets here. And that's probably the most important thing to understand with sales staff. The guys that I've seen, guys and women that I've seen do the best in this industry are people persons. They're people that like to sit down and relate to you and understand your situation, not force something down your throat. The minute you try to hard sell in this industry, people run. It's not what they're looking to do. And, at the end of the day, just be very careful on who you pick. There again, don't pick the guy that believes that he's God's gift to the sales world. He's a silver-tongued devil and he can sell anything to anybody. It's just not the way to walk it. And then types of sales staff. varies a lot. And I get this question a lot, and I've got my favorites, but I'm not going to play them here. I'm just going to lay them out. You got your first option, and probably the most common way to sell is in-house. You bring in a seasoned franchise salesperson, you pay them probably a six-figure salary, a nice commission. And by the time you add in your employment taxes and everything else, you basically paid all that twice, and it got expensive pretty quick. But that being said, that's the best way to hit the ground running by far. Outsourced is a weird situation, and most people wouldn't even look at this as an option, but having done outsourced sales and outsourced development, I look at it all the time. You've got the ability to bring somebody in. Typically, this situation is going to be a former broker, not a former inside salesperson used to getting salary. Typically, your outsourced person is going to be somebody with a broker background. They're used to working on their own. They found that it's difficult to find fresh real estate to advertise. The brokers typically hit the portals, right? There's only so much real estate available that's a true hard lead drive, a nice brand name that's not doing their own advertising. And so a lot of times they're like, what else could I do? And the answer is you could get tied to a specific concept where you work all their leads yourself, weren't having to do your own marketing. The concept saves themselves some money by not having to pay you a salary, gets a seasoned person in the door. I like that scenario a lot myself. I've made it work several times successfully. There's a lot of people out there that would marry themselves on the sales side, that would marry themselves into this situation. But I don't think concepts look at it this way. They don't look at that as a viable option for them. It's a pink elephant, right? It's something most people haven't ever heard of or thought about. And then you're typically in that situation, you can pay a lot less per sale than you'd have to pay with a broker, because this person's working leads that the concept generated. They're not having to spend their own marketing dollars. And then the last option, and this is very popular, I just wish it weren't as popular amongst emerging startups, is the broker route and the coaching route. And typically here, you're at 40% of franchise fee to get in the game. What I don't like about this situation mostly is a complete lack of control with where you're going to grow and how fast. You're going to take these leads as they come. You're going to sell them as you can. And that's what's going to happen. Whether it shows up in Texas or Tennessee or Alaska is really not up to you. They're going to bring you a good candidate when they find one. You're not going to have that, wow, we'd like 10 units in the next year. We'd like them to be in this geographic area. All of that's out the window. You're basically held hostage till something shows up, gets thrown over the fence and lands on you. And it's a severe lack of control situation that I don't like in the beginning. If you're going to sell Atlanta, you're going to sell Denver, you've got 3 stores you own and you just launched your concept. This really isn't the route you need to go. I'm a big believer in slow, controlled, tempered growth in the beginning. And I'm a big believer in selling directly in the beginning. The brokers, to me, really come into a really strong value as you come through and let's say you succeed, right? Let's run some quick numbers for fun. 40% of franchise units won't break 20 unit total. Almost half the guys that come out are never going to break 20 because they're doing a lot of the things that we talked about doing wrong. Things are going to get in the way, things are going to unwind, etc. And after you break into the bigger units, only 20% of franchises ever break 100. So the concepts we've been lucky enough to work with, that we're growing at 100 units a year. I mean, those are the unicorns of the industry, right? They are so few and far between in an industry with 5,000 concepts in it. The number that grow at over 100 is so few by comparison. And it's important to know those numbers. All of a sudden, you've got 2 units averaged out in every state. You've got at least 1 in every major metro. And now all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, I don't want to be in Atlanta. I've got my 2 Atlanta units. They're going to grow some more. I've got my 2 in Denver. I've got 3 in Los Angeles. And really, I want to go sell Modesto, California, or I want to go sell Tallahassee, Florida, or I want to sell Savannah, Georgia. All of a sudden you start getting into these secondary and tertiary markets. These are where I feel the brokers have their most value, because now you're dealing with a guy that he's working with his local market, his local clientele, and leveraging you into places that you can't typically get lead flow. I see that where their strength is. And as much as I work with brokerages and coaching networks, and I love them to death, I don't, in all honesty, believe a startup concept that's, if you're in the wheelhouse, you're under 100,000. You've got something with some appeal to it. You've got nationwide capability. I don't see any reason to start it out this way. I just don't. And if you do start it this way, you're missing a large part of your education as well on who is my candidate, A, who's interested in my business, and B, out of those people that are interested, who's actually qualifying. And you're going to skip that whole part of the process if all you're catching is what's coming through the filters.
And this is another interesting one. How do I work my leads? They don't teach that in franchise sales school,
Oh man, and this is done so wrong so many times. Our primary rule, 3 dials to dead. And a lot of people, let's start with two sides of the coin. Let's start with the fact that you can either try to qualify everybody and see who doesn't make it, or you can disqualify people as fast as humanly possible and see who's left. I like the second side of the coin myself. To sit there and run 10 or 12 attempts at contact, to believe something's not dead when you've got 9 signs it is just dreaming. We typically run a 3 dials to the dead rule, but we vary the times of contact. So say you get a new lead in, it comes in to you at 10 o'clock in the morning. The first attempt you should make is 10 o'clock in the morning, because apparently that person was available. Say you don't reach that person at that time. The next attempt should be in the mid-afternoon. See if maybe you can catch them before the workday's over, where they catch a lag if they're at work. And then if you don't reach them that time, your third attempt should be at night, in case they're in a situation where they're only available when they step out of the office. They can't talk about anything while they're at work, and home is really when they'd rather have that conversation. At the end of the day, the golden rule is just don't chase bad candidates. Qualify them heavy up front. If they're not going to return your calls, they're probably not going to perform for you either. If the person doesn't conduct business the way you want them to conduct business at your franchise, they're dead. And leave it at that, or else you're going to chase a bad candidate, award a bad franchise, and wind up right where we talked about earlier on the unwind. Bad place to be. The other thing you need to vary is not just your call times and attempts, but it's how you're reaching out to them. As we touched on earlier, so much communication these days is being done mobile. It's being done via laptop. It's being done via phone. And so you need to be aware of the fact that a lot of times they're not home. So make your voice calls, but back up your voice call with an email that, hey, I called you, I missed you, but send the email in case that's their preferred method of communication. Send them a text as well in case they just don't want to be on a live call. But while you're only giving 3 dials and 3 attempts, make it across multiple platforms at different times a day. It's all about efficiency here. And then, more important than almost anything you could ever do on the sales front, please use a CRM tool. Please use something that is going to automate some responders. So say we get a lead in for Mike's Pizza at 10 in the morning, but you're out at a conference. We want that person to get a thank you for their submission, some initial information, and let them know who's going to be reaching out immediately in your absence. So we want a CRM in place that's going to take the leads in, it's going to send some initial information out, and it's going to make an attempt to set an appointment for you. But as we touched on appointments, autoresponders, it's very important that your autoresponder tries to set an appointment. Don't just, hey, it's Mike, here's some information, I'll be reaching out to you soon. Send it to them that our next step is to have a conversation. If you'll come back to me with 3 days and times that work for you, I'll respond with one that works for me as well, and we'll get on the phone.
That's what we added to our drum law contact us. We'd have, hey, do you want to franchise your business, buy a franchise? And then they'd reach out, and our first email back was, what time are you available for a call? Well, we just added that as a question. Please let us know your availability for a call, so that we can immediately book that call. We cut out a back and forth step, made it more efficient, more useful.
Exactly. Like we talked about, don't give away all the information up front. In fact, don't give away hardly any of the information up front. Here's some initial information. Please review our website, and please let me know when you're available, because our next step is conversation. Be very clear, very concise about what you're trying to do. The next piece of your CRM is drip campaigns. And your drip campaigns are basically reaching out to candidates you're missing. So we've got our 40% contact rate. We've got 10 new leads in the door. You're going to reach 4 of them by phone. 6 of them you're not. You want your drip campaign to have some pre-staged emails that are slow bleeding information to this person to try to entice them to that call. There again, here's another piece of information, some secondary stuff for you to look at. Again, let me know when you're available so we can speak. Typically, the drip campaign should be a message every 2 to 3 days, anywhere from 3 to 10. I think 10 is too many, but typically maybe 3 to 5. And if you've not gotten any response after your 3 attempts across multiple platforms, different times, your drip campaigns and autoresponders, you can safely say that person's dead to you. There's really nothing going to happen here. For whatever reason, they filled this out, but for whatever reason, they're not any good for me right now, and throw them in your back data pool. And their back data pool is the next point we've got, which is your back database marketing. Your back database is a valuable thing. Those guys that said no have a value. And you'll find sometimes no means later. Sometimes a guy comes through and goes, I was looking at that, but I decided no. Well, maybe his mom got sick, or maybe one of his wife lost her job. You don't know what happened. But your no's a lot of times are not, no, I would never do this. It's no, the timing's no good. What we encourage you to do with your back database is market to them periodically with your success. Just run the flags of success in front of them. We opened a new unit. We hit new profitability. We had our best year ever. Just pitch the positives over and see if they won't at some point re-engage you. Don't spend time dialing them, but automate that process. And every now and then you'll be surprised what comes back. And then quarterly is the timing we recommend that you do that full database push. If you market to them monthly, they'll go away and unsubscribe. If you come at them quarterly, we find that they'll typically stay in the rotation, and that's the goal.
Great point. I like that. The quarterly, you're absolutely right. It's just enough that even if I'm not quite interested, and I may not want to go through the effort of unsubscribing, but every month or week, I'm going to unsubscribe. And then this is the from the Road Less Stupid. What gets measured is what gets done. What gets measured is what gets managed. What gets measured and reported can improve exponentially.
Yep, and this is a part that hurts me a lot of times. I mean, one of my first questions to potential clients is, what are you spending each month currently? What's your current cost per acquisition? Those two numbers should be front of mind all the time. And the number of franchisors that tell me they don't know is greater than the ones that do. I'd like to give a tip on the hat to PJ's Coffee recently. We asked them and they knew. They were able to get their numbers right away. The data is critical. To run around and do a good job is one thing. To be able to improve upon that job is another. You need to track your leads in by each source that you got. And a lot of the problem people fall into here is they track their leads and they track their sales. You need to track several points in your sales process between those two to see where the drop off is. You need to track the leads in. You need to track the contacts. What percentage of them did you reach? You need to track your progressions, which is basically your RFC, your request for consideration. The people that want the bigger piece of information, they want the full boat of information that you're not giving away at the beginning. And then you need to follow your FDDs and your sales. And then you need to look at the associated percentage and cost of each. And the reason this is important, I realize that gets a little convoluted, but what you're looking at here, it's one thing to look at data. It's another thing to look at comparative data. So it's one thing to know that, well, I paid this much per lead and this much per sale, but it's another thing to know how these providers stack up against each other. And so we typically, I'll give all this away. We typically like to look at what percentage of our leads were you, what percentage of budget and expense, percentage of leads in the door, percentage of RFC and progressive consideration, and then percentage of sales. And the reason these are important, I'm gonna give you an illustrative example. And we typically call this the lesson, don't fall in love with your lead leader. The guy that tells you how many leads do you want in a month, don't love that guy, be scared of that guy, because he shouldn't be able to give you an unlimited quantity. And so we run around, we've always got some people that are out there in the industry that are providing their portal leads or whatever other leads they've got, that they're kind of bottom basement pricing, high volume, here you go. And the example I give typically is that if you've got a provider that's 20% of, we'll use a smaller number, we'll say 10% of your budget but they're 20% of your leads. These are really cheap leads. They're coming to the door. We love this. Well, if that site turns around and is 10% of your production, you worked too hard to get there. They were 10% of your expense, but you had to work twice as many leads you should to get your 10% production. If somebody comes in and they are 10% of your budget, but they're only 5% of your leads, your initial thought is those leads are too expensive. But if you then find that that site is 10% of your closes, well, they were the correlating percentage of what you spent, and you honestly had to work very little to get there. You didn't have to sit there and run through millions of numbers. The guy you're looking for is the guy that gives you the more expensive lead, but you only have to touch a few of them to get to your sales. And in the industry, it's often misrepresented. Everybody wants to fall in love with the cheap volume guy. And when you go and do your in-depth sales analytics, that person's not your friend. They're burning your sales guy and taking your time, but they're not providing enough production to matter.
If you're not tracking it or analyzing it, you have no idea. You
won't know.
Metrics.
Yeah, and there again, if you're just watching, percentage of here's what part of my budget they were, and here's what part of my sales they were, you might fall in love with the guy on accident. But really, he made you work twice as hard to get there, and that's a trap. It's not the place you want to be. It's very important there again to have the CRM to get your data, and then not just look at 1 or 2 points, but look at multiple points down your sales pipeline, not only to see where you might have drop-off problems, but to see how everything corresponds. And the guy you love the most is the guy that took you the least amount of dollars and the least amount of work to get the sale in the door. And the work is just as valuable as the money, because like we talked about, you're paying a sales guy. If you outsourced them, they're going to leave because you're working them too hard. If they're inside, you're either paying them to not convert, or you're going to burn them out and they're going to leave and you're going to find a replacement. It's a bad trap to fall into, but it's all too common in this industry. And then reacting accordingly is also important. You need to look at these numbers and decide what you're going to do with them. The best thing to do is to bolster your best converting sources. You either trim down or eliminate your worst converting sources. And the reason I say trim down and not just eliminate, there are sources out there that you'll find that they might be able to provide you 30 good leads in a month, but you opened up the hopper to 60. And all of a sudden you're getting the 30 good ones you were getting, and you're getting 30 that are kind of padded. They're not really making the grade. You need to keep your sites and your sources with where their conversion is best. If you open up the hopper too wide, they will try to fill it, but your conversion numbers will show you've made a mistake. And you kind of got to find a sweet spot with your providers to know what you can tolerate and what they can provide that keeps everything in line. And then, like we talked about a moment ago, not just for your comparative data for your providers, but for your sales process. And this is a lot of the consulting we do at Insights. We're watching the stages of your sales process. In general, you should, there again, broad generalization, swooping number. You should convert 10% of your leads into candidates and 10% of your candidates into sales. That's how you get that 1 in 100 number. So you need to be watching the steps of your sales process to see if you're getting that conversion. And if all of a sudden you've got a point in your sales process where it looks like things are falling off the cliff, it's because they are. And that portion of your sales process has got a problem. And when we go in and consult with people's sales processes, we always start at the very beginning, start at the front and keep working the numbers, tuning. We call it the quarter turn of the screw exercise. You have a perfectly good machine, but a couple of screws are loose. If you tighten it up, it'll run. And so we start at the front and work our way to the back and basically consult and tighten that sales process, try to fix the drop-offs till you wind up at the end where the sales are spitting out the back.
Excellent, sir. Well, David, this has been a blast. I'm going to work on highlighting some of this in our Franchise Things webpage. And I think there's so much information. I'm just excited the idea of what I can do besides presenting this video. What else can I do? And I think there's a lot of sub nuggets and sub presentations, and we can kind of email around. So I'm going to be following up with there because there's a lot of great stuff here, and I really appreciate your time. I'm putting all your contact information up. It'll also be at the bottom of the video. And once again, you're a huge resource. This has been awesome.
It's my pleasure, Mike. It's been a pleasure to work with you as long as we have. And it's always great to engage with you. The conversation's always interesting.
Let's keep going to another 13 or 14 more years, then we can call it. How about that?
There you go. Then we'll be on vacation in the Bahamas.
Love it. All right.